The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu. Introducing Miss Emily Reeves and Miss Lori Fouch on this topic of newcomers. In our collaborative meetings, this is one of the topics that kept popping up when we said, what do you need help with? And one of the topics was newcomers, and when they first come in. And then another thing that this combines is, in the early meetings of the collaborative, we would hear, well, we're hearing mostly about things to do in elementary school and maybe middle, but not much in high school. And so when they offered the high school newcomers, I thought, well, that's combining two things that we've heard we have a need for. So, Smyrna High School, Ms. Reeves and Ms. Fouch, Emily and Lori, take it away.
Thank you.
All righty. All righty, well, welcome. Like she said, I am Emily Reeves, and we are both from Smyrna High School.
I'm Lori Fouch.
Yes, and I have been teaching at Smyrna High School for, I guess, since 2015, so going on 5 years, 6 years total in the high school setting.
And I have been at Smyrna for going on 9 years, and taught elementary school 2 years prior to that as well.
Yeah, and just as an introduction, we wanted to establish that we by no means are experts in newcomer program development. Our goal for this presentation is to kind of validate some challenges that you might have had in your classroom, as well as offer some techniques that have been successful for us, and things that we're still learning about and still growing from. So we'll get on with that. Let's see, here we go.
Okay, this is our agenda for the day. We're going to hit on each of these things, some in more depth than others, especially curriculum. But these are just the basics that we're going to go over today.
Absolutely. So, who are we? In addition to what I said just a few moments ago, our newcomer program is pretty unique.
Yes. I said I'd been at Smyrna for 9 years, and the newcomer program has changed dramatically from the time that I first began, and we'll get into that in a little more detail later. It's pretty much a one-language program for newcomers now, which is Spanish. When I first started at Smyrna, it was a pretty good mix of Karen, Arabic, and Spanish, which had its benefits, but now it's pretty much switched back to a Spanish-speaking dominant newcomer program. And let's see, I've been at Smyrna for 9 years, and 2 in elementary prior to that. And
yeah, so what I wanted to do here is highlight a special group of newcomers. This is the first group of newcomers that I had as newcomers, as freshmen. And just this past May, I was able to see them graduate. And so it's my first group that I saw all 4 years. And so seeing that transition has been really special for me, and seeing them learn and grow and fly away from the nest has been something that's been really emotional, but also something that has evoked a lot of pride. And so it's been awesome to kind of see the finish line for these students, and I can't wait to see future newcomers also graduate. So this was, I believe, so you'll see some baby faces here in the middle. This is when they were freshmen, and then we have their graduating photos here. Anything else to add?
Yeah, just a little bit about our school demographically. Let's see, for ELL students at Smyrna, we have about 300 at our high school. I think, let's see, 1 in 10 of our school population are direct serve ELL. And then non-English language background at Smyrna is close to 40%. So that's just a little bit about the school environment that we're in.
Yes, so we mentioned that it's kind of a one language dominant school. So even if students are not in ESL, it's pretty common that if you are walking down the hallways of Smyrna High School, you're going to hear a Spanish conversation. They don't have to be in ESL. And if our newcomers go into a mainstream classroom, it's probable that they'll be able to have a conversational exchange with someone who speaks their native language.
Although I will say at Smyrna, in the larger whole school population, Spanish is definitely not the only represented language. I believe we have at least 10 different languages represented at our school. Yeah. So it is pretty diverse.
Correct. Alrighty, so up here on the screen is a definition of what a newcomer is that a federal report, the Newcomer Toolkit, came up with. And it says that newcomers refer to any foreign-born students and their families who have recently arrived in the United States. Now, this is a blanket definition, and we all understand that newcomer means so much more than that.
Yeah.
But kind of to create a baseline, we wanted to offer that definition.
Okay, I had placed some note cards at the end of the tables. We really do want this to be collaborative. And we want you to feel free at any moment to just kind of be like, can you explain that a little more? Or ask a question, give a thought. With the note cards, if you just have a second, jot down, talk with a partner. What's something that you have wondered about newcomers or just about newcomer programs? So just kind of take 2 minutes and think about anything you have, any burning questions.
A question, a frustration, a success.
Anything you can share.
Yeah, shareable.
And if we don't cover it sometime during this presentation, hopefully in the Q&A we'll have a minute to go over those questions and thoughts. Thank you guys. I love getting these.
Yeah, so we can use this as a basis for our Q&A later on in the presentation, but if we do not answer it, make sure, and if we do not come to it there, make sure to mention those questions towards the end of the presentation, because we want to make sure, like she said, it's a collaborative effort here. We want this to be as much as a forum as possible and try to be as helpful. All right? Alrighty, so when developing a newcomer program, something that's has been really important for our program at Smyrna High is to kind of have a philosophy or some different pillars of the program that kind of bolster newcomer success. So up here I have, first of all, a newcomer program has to have a positive environment. That is kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah, also obviously you need accessible content.
All right, content, but we all know that if we are teaching content and it's not accessible, you're going to get a lot of blank stares. Also, emotional support has been really, really important for our population.
And obviously that academic push. When you teach high school, you got, what, 4 years in a semester? Isn't that? Yeah. That's a lot to do with a newcomer in 4 years. So while it's positive and fun, you have to make that push for getting the academic settings.
And lastly, we have noticed that fun goes a long way in a newcomer classroom. It kind of reduces that affective filter and allows students to really engage and kind of be in an environment that they can trust.
We already touched on positive environment a little bit. You want your classroom to be the place that they want to be. Their safe place. This is really their first experience with an American school, and you want it to be a positive one.
Yeah, and I kind of like to take on the responsibility of being that first impression of the United States for a lot of our students, and that's a great responsibility to have.
Yeah.
In terms of being a newcomer teacher, I don't know about at your school, but at our school, it comes with a lot of freedom and a lot of trust of our program with our administration, which is really great, but it also comes with a lot of responsibility. Kind of touching on being that first impression of the United States, we have a huge responsibility to grow these students as quickly as possible in the most effective way.
Yes. And then finally, as ESL teachers, it is so important to know that we are not just teaching academics. We, in our program especially, stress that we are instructing a whole person.
Yeah, we like to say that, or I like to say that I'm teaching the head, heart, and hands of a student. Took that from my undergraduate program at Berry College. So teaching the head, heart, and hands is something that's really important to me and our program at Smyrna High.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. At our school, we stress a family dynamic. You see that saying, don't smile until Christmas. No, definitely not.
Did anyone else get that in their undergraduate program?
Oh yeah.
Don't smile until Christmas. You've got to maintain this
taskmaster,
stoic personality so that they can know you cannot be pushed, you cannot be walked all over. However, I've realized that we can't do that in a newcomer program, right?
No,
that's going to hurt our program and hurt our academic success for sure.
Yep.
First of all, I think Lori, as well as our program, we do a great job of creating a safe environment for our students. Do you want to touch on that at all?
Yeah, like I said, we have a very familial setting. When the kids come in, we always, we introduce them. We say, hey, we have a new brother, we have a new sister. And we present ourselves as like I'm your mom in the school. That is absolutely how we do it with every kid that comes into our school. And we really almost force them to like each other and to be each other's partners in everything. And you'll see it, they go around the school together. Another good thing that we do, I think, is that we always make sure that we have this policy. Nobody ever goes alone. No one ever goes alone. That's always what we say. We say you have to have one of your buddies from the newcomer class with you at all times.
Especially for that first 9 weeks,
yeah,
that first semester. This has played out pretty nicely. We have just to make it applicable, we have a student who came in who is very, very emotional and very high stress. In situations, you can tell that there has possibly been some trauma there. And it has been a beautiful thing to see. Historically, maybe they would have been a target for bullying or for making fun of. And our newcomer program, or our newcomer students, have started to become a protector of that student and really been a family, been a brother and a sister to that student. And that is something that has been really, really beautiful to see.
Yeah.
So fostering that safe environment is going to be really, really important. And in an applicable setting, we have, so along with introducing our new brother or sister to the program, I also show my family. I show pictures every time a student comes, and if you know, we're going to touch on this a little bit later. A new student, especially through our doors, can come maybe one day after the other after the other. It's kind of a revolving door at Smyrna High School for sure. And so every day that a new student comes in, I pause whatever I'm doing.
Yeah.
I introduce my family, show them pictures. I do it in their native language. I butcher my Spanish to them just to show, hey, I'm learning too. I'm learning a second language as well. I'm going to try to speak Spanish to you, so I want you to do the same. So, in terms of parent involvement, this is something that we are still trying to fine-tune. Like Lori said, the population at Smyrna High School has changed drastically over the last 8 years. At one point in our ESL program, we found it appropriate to go on home visits for our parent-teacher conferences. And like I said, we have gained the trust of the administration, and it's been an open dialogue in terms of how we can best meet those needs of our newcomers. Because we know that our ESL newcomers, parents' work schedules might be a little different. They might be scared to come into the school. So we found that going to them, and they all pretty much, we have certain populations that live in the same apartment complexes or communities, and so it was pretty easy for us to do that. That was a few years ago. Now we find it more appropriate to invite our parents to come at the beginning of the year for our parent-teacher conferences.
Yeah, we took a page from the elementary school playbook where we sent home invitations and had them choose time slots. And we didn't really know what to expect, but we were very overwhelmed with the result. We had, in high school anyway, it's kind of a problem to get parents in for parent conferences, but especially with ESL, and we were slammed last year with people. We had our responses, and we didn't know would they really show up, but they did, and they were so happy to be there. So that has been a great success, is just sending out invitations and saying, we really want you to come. We want to give you a tour of the school, want to show you your kids' classrooms. And they came, and they were so, they were so gracious and so thankful. Again, with our broken Spanish and with our school translator. It was just a really wonderful experience. Yeah.
And I'm not sure the different populations that we're presenting to, but it offers a really, really sweet connection. I like to tell anyone who teaches general education or a mainstream classroom, if you want to have the utmost parental support, teach ESL.
Yes.
Right? If you want the parent to be on your side, to be on your team, to conquer challenges with that student, be an ESL teacher. I don't think mainstream teachers understand how supported you are by parents. We've just got to use that to our advantage, right? And we've got to be able to access that parental support. And we find that if we invite them at the beginning of the school year with one of those parent-teacher conferences, that we have established a positive relationship with them right off the bat.
Yes. And then finally, our ESL Team Dynamics within our school.
Do we have any teachers here who are the only ESL teacher at their school? Okay.
A lot.
All right, so a lot. Okay.
For us, we have 6 full-time ESL teachers at Smyrna, not counting our 2 full-time ESL math teachers. Because again, our population warrants that we have that many. And we've been able to build a great team that, and we each have our own little roles and special areas, but
yes,
the team dynamic has been really important.
So Lori Fouch's role has been kind of the mother of the program, right? She is who the students go to with all the personal problems or successes or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm the first to know if someone's pregnant.
Yes.
Always.
Yes.
Always.
This is something I'm very proud of. I got this on all of my teacher appreciation notes for my students. I have been deemed the strictest teacher in the ESL program, and I wear that like a badge of honor. So they know that when they come into my classroom, there will not be a free day. I am very, very strict in terms of what I expect. My expectations are high, but I still do have a heart, I would say. So
yeah, they know they're loved by her. For sure.
If you do work in a team, something that I've had to realize is that it's really nice to delegate those personal matters to Miss Fouch or some of our other ESL teachers. And vice versa.
And our school has been awesome because it was a problem for a while with all the personal stuff, like in the middle of class, like, right. And so my school has been amazing to allow time designated for me in the school day to have like little meetings, like set up meetings for when there's a problem. So I can be like, I do care about that, but can you come back at 1:30? And they, you know, and unless they're sobbing, that's what we do. That's how we handle it. It's been really great.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Since we're hearing from, we have schools in this room that have teams of people, and then we have schools in this room who have a single person doing the program. So can we, in this conversation, explore alternatives for both situations, where we have a team and where we have a single ESL
Absolutely.
person?
Absolutely. In my first year of teaching, I was actually the only ESL teacher at 2 schools. And so in the mornings I was at one school, and in the afternoons I was at another school. And so this was a huge challenge for any teacher, but especially a first year teacher who was probably about 4 years older than the oldest student, right? So because we have like a 19-year-old student, and then we have a 23-year-old teacher who is trying to navigate all of those roles.
Right.
It was impossible for me to be that mother figure for those students. And so something that I would offer is surrendering that you can't be everything, but do something that you're really good at. Harness what you're really good at in terms of consistency. I might not have been able to establish that trust early on because of my age in terms of personal matters, but they knew every day that I was going to be in the classroom at this specific time. And there was kind of a window of opportunity for them to come in and to discuss what's going on in the school day. So I really liked what she said about, you know, kind of blocking off a time for students to come and talk about personal things, right? Or talk about things that are frustrating them. I remember that being really essential for some of my freshman newcomers, my first year of teaching. They were really lonely. The schools that I was working at, they didn't have very big populations, so they were really lonely. So they found some friendship in that little block of time with me. So I would probably say that that is a big, a really great suggestion.
Also, if you are a person who is the single ESL teacher in your school, do work to build a community, even if there are not other ESL teachers in your classroom. You know, find 2 or 3 other people that can be your people. Because I do feel like the community within the school is important, and the better the relationships you have with your faculty, I mean, that's only good for everyone, and especially your students.
Yeah. And beyond finding a community amongst the other teachers, I would say also build a community, a relationship with your counselors. We have 2 of our Smyrna High counselors here today, which they are so understanding, and we have a really great relationship with our counselors. I found if I could go back in time, with my first year of teaching, being the only teacher at both schools, I would have established a friendly relationship, a positive relationship with those counselors, and gotten to know the tricks of the trade of credits and making sure you've got all your hours and making sure that the course codes are correct. I would go to them and get a full-length tutorial on all things counselor. And not only on the academic side, but also on a personal note.
Awesome.
So, alrighty. So, this is the point in the presentation where I kind of want to validate a lot of feelings in terms of high school ESL programs, challenges that we've had that have kind of set us up to problem solve, right?
Yeah. So you can see some of the issues that we face, that everyone faces, that teaches ESL or high school at all. But just a quick rundown for us. Some of the challenges that we have hopefully turned into positives. But these are just some of the things that we have definitely run into.
We mentioned this earlier, but the one language dominance, in terms of our ESL program, we have a number of sheltered classes. Specifically with newcomers, that has been a huge challenge for me specifically this past year. Trying to establish that we are going to choose to practice our English instead of just relying on your neighbor to just quickly give you the answer. That is something that maybe you guys have some solutions to that I can learn and grow from. That has been a huge problem. Making that choice is really hard to do when you're learning a language.
Yes.
I'm going to choose to practice English. As someone who has studied or who has traveled abroad to a Spanish-speaking country, I was forced outside of my comfort zone to communicate with the bus driver, to communicate with the bank, to communicate with school officials. In a sheltered environment, you don't have that same push. And so our goal for this next year, or my goal for this next year, is to establish an environment where there's a little bit more of that uncomfortable situation, but also protected, right?
Grouping, that's always an issue. Like in our newcomer classes, as I'm sure it is in yours as well, we have some kids who are highly educated. We had some Venezuelans come in this year, a good little chunk of Venezuelans, and those kids, their education was very established. And then we have,
as an example of that, I use Edmodo in my classroom. It's an online platform. It's kind of like Facebook, but academic. And I walked in to my newcomer class, and I said, "Has anyone ever heard of Edmodo?" Expecting, "What are you talking about?" And one of my Venezuelan students said, "Yeah, we use this every day." Right. Yeah, we use this every day in Venezuela. Oh, this is no problem. I think I still remember my username. So it is crazy to have that in comparison with a student maybe who had interrupted education. And they're in the same class.
And how to pair them together in activities, that's always a challenge.
Yeah. I mentioned this earlier, the revolving door is something that I love in terms of it always keeps me guessing. It always keeps me prepared and ready for a new student. However, it really works against that consistency that I desire in my classroom. Does that resonate with anyone else? Revolving door, that is so hard. As soon as you get these procedures learned, a new student comes in and we have to spend time doing that. But the thing that we have to keep in mind is that if we don't spend that extra time, no one else will, right? Yeah. So it's essential that, as frustrating as it can be, we have to keep in mind that it is our job.
Yeah. Then assessment, again, we talk about this a lot in ESL, but it is very necessary to assess where your newcomers are at the beginning, middle, end, and all throughout. I think informal assessment, for me, has been the best kind of indicator to see where they are and how they're growing, but of course we do some traditional assessment as well. But you have to find a balance, what works for you, what works for your kids.
Mm-hmm. In terms of assessment as well, something that I've had to kind of break down the barriers is realizing that the formal assessment of multiple choice, while that is important to expose our students to that early on so they can flourish in future classes, there are alternatives to that formal assessment, that traditional multiple choice assessment. So I've tried to incorporate as much performance-based projects as possible through tons of technology, which I'll touch on in just a moment.
And then again, parent involvement, we talked about that. We feel like we found a good way to take what was kind of negative and make it a positive with the invitations.
And devices. Devices, which is a challenge for every teacher. specifically in the ESL realm or newcomer realm, the device challenge that I have found is translators. Translating every single sentence, every single paragraph, every single thing that they come across, and then just showing me on the screen. Which, like I mentioned, I have traveled abroad. I went to Costa Rica, and I found that I just communicated via Google Translate for the first week, probably, just because I would try so hard and realize it's so much easier. Just please, I just want this to be lifted from me. Please, I'm just desperate for communication. And so we have had a huge challenge. If y'all have any solutions for that, I would be welcome and opening. Yeah, so welcome and open for those. Alrighty, so now we're going to kind of transition into some techniques that we have found. Something that I want to establish in terms of an ESL newcomer program is, this is a huge part of my philosophy, is exposing our students to technology and having that in my curriculum and in my instruction at least once a week, twice a week, maybe not every day. But this is something that's essential, that I found essential for my newcomer program. As soon as my students come in, I want them to be able to have access to the same things that mainstream students have access to. Yeah. So here I use Office 365, Canva, Piktochart, Edmodo, Flipgrid, Duolingo, and Vocaroo. I use that in my first 9 weeks, in my second 9 weeks, all throughout the school year. And what I've realized that this requires time and patience. I mentioned this in a previous presentation, but I think there is nothing more exhausting than the first 9 weeks of trying to instruct an ESL newcomer how to sign on to a computer.
Or turn it on.
Turn it on, get username, the domain name, the password. This is something that has created a lot of exhaustion for me in my experience. And so what I've tried to do is build up as many things that can assist them without me as possible. Try to make as much independent activity as possible. Repetition is the only way that we're going to get there, and adjusting expectations for each student, right? The student who is from Venezuela, who had Edmodo exposure, let her become a helper in the classroom of helping everyone sign on to Edmodo.
That's also something, when you have established this, and Emily does a great job of establishing this in her classroom, when you have taught all the others, you know, what they're supposed to do, what's expected in all of these programs, when a new kid comes in, they really take on the role of being the teacher, and that's positive.
Yes, it is positive, and it's essential, because if I were to do that every day of the school year, I think that I would just pitter-putter out. So one way that I've done this is create visual instructions for every process that we do in my classroom. I did not do this all at once because that would be exhausting as well. Over 5 years that I've been teaching this, I've tried to grow my treasure trove of resources and visual instructions. So this one was made through Piktochart. Typically what I do is just screenshot and put it in a Word document and print it out. That's the easiest way. I've been trying to make it more visually pleasing, so I've used Piktochart. Of giving each step of what to do, attaching a visual image to it so they know exactly where to touch. If I say go to your Google Chrome browser, students are probably not going to know exactly what that is, but if they see that visual, oh, I can find that on the list pretty easily. And this gives, like I said, start building your collection now. If you want to if you want to create a screenshot Word document of how to get onto the computer, start that now this year, and then next year do a different visual instruction.
Yep.
And it'll probably change. Technology always changes, so you'll probably have some time.
Revise.
Yeah, to revise.
Okay, one thing that we have both found successful in our newcomer classrooms are setting up stations. Again, kind of an elementary school thing. You think, oh, station work, and you think elementary. But we have both been able to find some success in having stations set up at different points in the room, and activities that include the 4 language domains. And it's also it's very student-led. For example, my kids know when they come in, their first 20 minutes of our class time is going to be composed of 10 minutes of writing time and then 10 minutes of speaking. And so they come in, and that's every single day. They know they're going to come in, we're going to go over the day, and what is today, what's yesterday, what's tomorrow. And then instantly they're going to have something written about whatever we have been learning, whatever topic we've been discussing. On the board, there's a question there. And they know to immediately, like they come in and they have their journals before they even sit down, and they start writing, and they have to, it's always a big treat for them if I let them only write 3 sentences. But typically it's 5 sentences every day that they have to come in. They have 10 minutes to write it and have either myself or our EA check their writing. So they come in, they do 10 minutes of writing, and then after that's done and everybody's been checked, then we do an activity, kind of a circular activity with A and B people, where they discuss their responses from their journal. So in both of those, it's using all 4 domains because they are writing, they are speaking, they're reading their writing, and they're listening to each other respond. So that's just important to just say we have all 4 things embedded into almost every activity, and they transition into the stations throughout the class time.
Are you on block?
We are.
We are on block. Mm-hmm. And my stations look a little bit different, a little differently. Something that I have forced myself to do is adopt the county's text, the Rutherford County text for ESL, and we'll talk a little bit about that curriculum a little later. But I have forced myself to adopt that text so I can have some sort of skeleton that can guide my stations. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to show you an example of some station work that I offer in my classroom. I not only have this kind of overarching guide for a student, but in each station I have specific instructions. Here I have taken curriculum from the Edge textbooks, and I have created stations with each of the language domains that helps incorporate the things that we are learning in the textbook. All right, I guess textbook usage is wildly debated on whether it should be used or not. But the fact that curriculum is such a challenge at the high school ESL level, mm-hmm. I have forced myself to use those themes in the text and then to create my own stations apart from the textbook, to kind of use it as a skeleton rather than the only source of information that we're using in the classroom. So we have a listening station that I usually have. I really like blended learning. So in 2 of the stations we use computers, in 2 of the stations we use pencil and paper. All right, and I found that this has been a really great way to incorporate a little bit of technology, not inundating our students with tons. Yeah. Also in one of my stations, I always try to incorporate a grammar station, which is wildly debated in the ESL forum as well. I find grammar and sentence structure really, really essential to my learning of Spanish. And so I also want to incorporate a little bit of grammar in one of my stations as well. If you see, typically I have 4 stations, and if they finish early, I tell them to use a flip grid. The speaking station and the listening station, or the writing station and the speaking station, they go hand in hand. They have to do the writing station before they do the speaking, because it uses the same information. The written text that they use in their writing station, they're going to use it by creating a flip grid and speaking the information.
Okay, reading. So we just wrote really quickly using simple text, and again, we do different things. She does depend on the textbook maybe a little bit more than I do, or at least as a starting point. But ESL Library is a good place to get some leveled texts. I create mine mostly, so I'll start with a super simple passage, 5 sentences, super simple that we begin with, and then it gets more complex as we move deeper into the topic, but it's based on those original 5 sentences, and it usually grows to 10 by the end of whatever period of time we're working on a certain topic. But obviously, at the very beginning, we're going to introduce that vocabulary first thing, whatever topic we're learning about, and then, as it says there, we'll just continue to build that original paragraph. Sometimes as a class we build it, and then that's their, final thing that they're reading at the end of the topic.
Yeah, and something as a challenge is locating texts that are appropriate for high school students, not seeing texts that are about
tying shoes,
a turtle and a rabbit, things like that, which is great. However, we have found that there's a huge need for someone to create texts that are appropriate for a high school student with really, I guess, a lower English proficiency.
Yeah.
So we are constantly trying to find those. I find the ESL Library is pretty useful in terms of at least finding thematic texts. Something else that I have found is teaching reading strategies as a really essential part of a newcomer program. This is an example of a reading strategy that I've created called the Psyop Method. I found that if I gave my students a text to read, depending on the length, they're going to look at the length of the text and say, nope, I can't do this. I don't understand. I don't understand. And this is something that I've tried to, I guess, incorporate to eliminate those questions. I'm going to show you an example here after. What we first do is, it doesn't matter how long the text is, the first thing that you're going to do is look at the questions, right? We know that this is a strategy that is helpful for ACT prep and everything like that, but we're going to look at the questions and we're going to highlight the most important words. I'm going to show you an example. You're going to highlight the most important words. Here we have name, all right? And you're going to go down the entire question, the question list, and choose the most important words. I like to tell my students, if you don't know the word, it's probably important. All right, so we're going to just go ahead and highlight it, all right? We're only going to highlight about 2 or 3 words in the question, no more than 2 or 3. All right? After this, you're going to go to the text. You're not going to read the text for meaning. It doesn't matter at this point. You're just going to, it's kind of like a scavenger hunt. I'll have the ESL newcomers work together to find the same highlighted names in the text. All right? So once they're done with that, the third step is that they're going to read it for meaning. Then they're going to go through and try to answer the questions in complete sentences here. And I have them, initially I have them do this as a pair activity. This year I had my seniors do this as an independent activity.
And I do something similar to this as a whole group activity, too. Right. Especially to begin with.
Right. And so something that I've realized is that if we teach reading strategies as newcomers, it's going to be so helpful later on in their academic career. So it doesn't matter if you don't have the perfect text. It doesn't matter if you have the perfect reading article, but teaching those skills is what's important, right? They could be reading whatever, but as long as they're practicing those skills, that's what's going to benefit. Alrighty, things to keep in mind. Go ahead.
Okay, establishing routine. I think I mentioned that a few minutes ago. My kids come in every day and they get their journal and they know exactly what's going to happen every single day. Now the topic changes and that kind of thing, and you might think, oh, that's boring. But for newcomers, it's very comforting to just know that they're coming in, they're getting this, and these two things are going to happen within the first 20 minutes of class. So establishing a routine in that first couple weeks of school is critical. Then we mentioned Psyop Method. Everybody that teaches ESL has heard this, what the Psyop Method is. I think the key thing in anything you do in ESL is building background and pre-teaching that vocabulary. You are going to front load that vocabulary. Front-loading that vocabulary, teaching it with visuals, teaching it with audio, every kind of way that you can give them those key words and phrases that are going to be used in whatever you're doing. We were lucky to hear from Shelly Thomas this morning about TPR, total physical response. Emily and I use that in absolutely everything we do.
Every day. Absolutely
everything. And then the blank stares, that's okay. You're going to get that a lot, especially in that first 9 weeks. And then finally, language use in any form should be celebrated and is valuable. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, just to say, sometimes I'll leave the classroom and I'm thinking, did that stick at all? I don't think that that was an effective lesson whatsoever. I got all the blank stares today. I don't think that I enhanced their language learning at all today. But what I have to realize is that me using English is advancing their language learning. Right? Yeah. And so giving myself a little bit of grace in terms of my instruction, any English that they hear is going to benefit.
Yeah, and anything that you can celebrate with them, do it, do it, do it.
Yes. All righty. All right. How to create curriculum for ESL. Like I've mentioned a couple slides ago, this is probably our biggest challenge.
Yes.
Finding age-appropriate text for our students and finding curriculum that can really engage our students is something that maybe we should invent that. Maybe we should
We've
quit our
discussed
jobs.
Inventing it, but time.
Yeah, and creating a curriculum that can be used for ESL students is something that's really needed. So we've been thinking maybe that'll be a second career maybe.
Yeah.
So we find, go ahead.
Okay, some of the things that we feel are really, really important. Survival language, our first 9 weeks, maybe whole first semester, is really getting our students comfortable with that throughout the school, using some basic phrases and just understanding survival school language. I mean, practicing that right off the bat is essential. And then we use thematic units, and now we've been doing it a few years, so we have kind of an established, not really a curriculum, I guess, but
we have different themes that we teach.
Yeah, and we do either piggyback off of each other, or we kind of establish at the beginning of the year, like, okay, you'll cover this and I'll cover this. But everything is thematic. Emily has really adopted this edge text as her
as my curriculum.
As her basic, yeah.
And like I said, the curriculum, or I don't technically like to use the textbook, but I use it as a skeleton, and so I'll develop ways in which that I can use the reading articles from the textbook, but I'll do it in kind of that station type way, right? I'll try to make it more engaging and more applicable to the high school setting by using that.
Yeah.
But this has really helped me become more content focused. So typically I'll spend the first 9 weeks or maybe the second 9 weeks with that survival language, and then I will hit pretty hard starting on really content-based, I guess, things that are typical in a mainstream classroom. So my newcomers last year, they learned about Romeo and Juliet. Now, did we read the Old English Shakespeare text? No, we didn't, but we did read an excerpt, and we got to know character analysis, and we got to learn conflict in a story or in a play. So knowing how to use that academic content and be able to use it in a vigorous way is something that I find really important to do for newcomers. Because if it is survival language and really easy and basic things the entire year, that's not going to prepare them for the next year or mainstream classroom. All right.
Okay. I've been going over some of these. If you remember your question, feel free to put your hand up and ask it. I pulled a couple. This one I thought was pretty key. How do you get your leadership to be on board and to see the need to do more for newcomers? Again, build relationships. Like from the beginning, even if like you have to fake it till you make it, build relationships with people in counseling office and in the main office with your administrators. Find someone that you can connect with.
Be seen and be known.
Yes, yes.
And smile.
Go to after-school activities. I mean, you really are the ambassador for your kids and your program. Have tough conversations with a smile on your face, even if it's painful. Like some things that you're like, I don't agree with you on that. Build those relationships.
Right, and I would say that the relationships that we have with our administration, it has been built over time.
Yes, it took a while. It's great now, but it took a
good while to establish our reputation in the Smyrna High setting, but now we feel like we have.
Yeah, we have great advocates in our admin, and yeah, we do. Let's see. You want to take a couple?
Okay.
Ooh, that's a good one.
So how does your school plan scheduling, knowing there are often influxes mid-semester? So we are fortunate to have kind of, I would say, an ESL liaison, our department head, Colin Olson.
Captain Colin.
Captain Colin. He does a lot of our, he'll love that. I hope he's watching on live stream.
I hope so too.
But he works a lot with our scheduling, and he is able to, we're not always able to anticipate how many newcomers we'll have. This year we've had the most that we've had.
30.
We had 30 newcomers who came in this year. And something that we're going to try to do this year, I'm going to be pushing into a U.S. history class with a mainstream teacher and try to help and assist him modify assessments and modify instruction to help our ESL students. However, if our ESL program really starts to blossom, that allows me to come out of that push-in environment and be able to serve maybe the 6 newcomers that came within a month of each other and kind of establish maybe a little bit more of cushion and allow me to pull out and teach those students. So we're going to try that. That's going to be a practice round this year. Maybe I can present next year and tell you how it went.
Feel free to pop your hand up if you really have something burning.
We can kind of do that. Were there any questions that weren't answered?
So I'm the only one at my school, and I have English content class, but I also have 2 newcomers. So I have like nothing, and it's a Spanish dialect, so I can't work Spanish there. And then all the way up to 3.5s.
Yes, I remember having the same problem my first year, having true newcomers and having really established. You know, is it an English 1 or English 2 class?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. That was a really big challenge for me. So I want to tell you that I hear you and I see you and I totally understand that feeling. Are you able to have an EA at all? No. Okay. So something that I would say implement is the station work and being able to have one-on-one station with those ESL students who are newcomers?
For a station, and then they have 3 stations by themselves,
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm. And then modify as much as possible. Specifically, in something that I used to do with them is modifying the most basic. So the grammar that I had, I might have 2 assignments, one for more advanced students and one for our lower proficiency. I might have the computer application that I use with my newcomers might be different than what I use with my higher students. I found that, so I had a student who speaks a dialect as well, or a language within Guatemala specifically, and her education was interrupted. And so my stations and my activities for her had to be a lot different.
Yes.
And my assessments had to be a lot different too. I remember giving her her first test that was multiple choice, and her not knowing that you circled answers, right? Mm-hmm. She circled words within the question. And so how I assessed her is if she could circle a letter, like a multiple choice letter. I remember having to adjust my expectations of, okay, she might not have gotten the questions right, or she might not have understood the test or assessment entirely, but at least she understood the process. And so in terms of my assessment, definitely had to be adjusted. Does that help at all? Yeah.
That's tough.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right.
It feels like I'm not doing.
No,
I feel
that's
that
where
way
you
too.
adjust your expectations of yourself too, I think.
No, but I will say, she graduated.
Yeah.
The student who I'm talking about,
And
she
she
graduated.
grew, in 4 years, she grew a ton.
But I
So-
did have to have that conversation with myself of, I feel like I'm not reaching her.
Right.
But the truth is,
Yeah, and she's able to text and say things like, I miss school so much.
yes.
We're like, that's
Yes,
awesome.
which is
So-
huge. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say. Any language is good.
Yeah.
You mentioned survival language. What do you consider as that correct survival language? Like, what do they
Within
mean?
a school setting, things like, may I use the bathroom? Where is the cafeteria?
Specifically, so I have some units. So my our first units are probably school-based vocabulary and navigating the school. My second is places in the community so that they can exist. They can go to the gas station and say, can you fill up my gas tank?
The grocery store.
The grocery store. My third unit is on calendar and dates. So I go over the months, the days, the numbers, ordinal numbers, cardinal numbers. My fourth is on communication styles, emails, telephone conversations, how to engage in an academic conversation, how to ask those academic questions. Those are my four, and then my fifth unit is usually based on holidays and cultures. So I would say that is something that those different units is something that I hit on.
Does that help? Yeah. Okay.
And I can send you some things. I can give you my email and send you some things that I use in my classroom as well.
Anything else?
Anything
we feel
else?
like we've talked a lot, but thank you for listening.
Here. Any other questions? Any other did this resonate with anyone? Oh, yeah. The challenges, the successes?
Keep pressing on though, y'all. I mean, seriously, you're so important to them as newcomer teachers, so important.
I did want to give you our contact information. Here's our emails, as well as the presentation can be found on my personal education account. It's called A Teacher's Love, and it's under the professional development form. It is the first article on the professional development tab. And I have a range of different resources there as well. So we want to thank you very much.
Yes,
like she
thank you
said,
guys.
You guys are important. And I'm honored to be a part of a small community, challenges and all. And hopefully you can see some people graduate and walk across the stage and with pride. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.